The stars burned cold and distant above the shattered husk of Epsilon Prime. A once thriving colony world now reduced to little more than a smoking ruin beneath the boot of the Vorlax dominion. The air still crackled with residual energy from orbital bombardments, the sky forever stained with the swirling remnants of antimatter detonations. Humanity had known war before, had seen the face of destruction in its own history, but this was different. This was extermination. In the vastness of space, Elias Voss sat in the dim interior of a stolen Dominion Corsair-class stealth ship, watching as the remains of his people's greatest colony drifted in eerie silence. The Vorlax had not come as conquerors seeking tribute or resources. No, they had come as executioners, passing judgment on a species they deemed unworthy of existence. He clenched his fists, feeling the cool metal of his worn-out combat gloves press against his palms. Humanity was outmatched, outgunned, outnumbered, and yet they fought on. Because that's what humans did. He exhaled slowly, forcing the rage to simmer beneath the surface as he turned his attention back to the mission briefing projected before him. A shimmering holo display revealed classified Dominion intelligence, a vault hidden aboard the Sovereign Exile, a flagship of the Vorlax elite. A vault containing something so feared, so untouchable, that even the Dominion refused to wield it. The Oblivion Blade. Legends spoke of its power, a weapon older than the Dominion itself, forged by a long-extinct precursor race that had once ruled the stars. It was said to be a rift in reality, an object that did not cut in the conventional sense but instead erased whatever it touched. The Dominion had safeguarded it for millennia, not because they wished to use it, but because they feared what would happen if it ever fell into the wrong hands. Elias smirked. Well, guess what, you bastards? You've pushed humanity to the edge. And when humans get desperate, we break your goddamn rules. The voice of Nick 7, the AI embedded in his ship's systems, interrupted his thoughts. Commander Voss, orbital patrol patterns indicate a vulnerability in the Sovereign Exile's security grid. If you intend to steal an artifact that defies all known physics, this would be the time. He pushed himself up from his seat, muscles tense with anticipation. Then let's not waste it. We breach, we take the blade, and we disappear. No mistakes. His team, assembled from the best the rebellion had left, moved swiftly through the ship. Dr. Asher Cole, an ex-Dominion scientist turned defector, clutched his data slate, eyes filled with reluctant fascination at the mission's objective. Tessa Renner, a demolitions expert, checked the charge on her plasma cutter with practiced efficiency, her jaw set in grim determination. Soren Vance, the silent but lethal infiltration specialist, adjusted his wrist-mounted stealth module. They had all lost something: families, homes, futures. But now, they were here, and they had one shot at striking back. The stolen ship hummed as it slipped into the void, weaving through Vorlax patrol routes with the precision of a predator stalking its prey. The Sovereign Exile loomed ahead, a behemoth of engineering, its sleek black hull reflecting the distant stars like a void that refused to be filled. It was not just a warship, it was a statement, a testament to Dominion superiority. Approaching target entry point, Nick 7 confirmed. Scanning for countermeasures. Elias placed a hand against the bulkhead, steadying himself. He had fought for years, seen death in more ways than he cared to count, but this was different. If the Dominion was right, if no being could wield the Oblivion Blade without consequence, then they were stepping into the unknown, tampering with something beyond comprehension. And yet, humanity had always done exactly that. They had split the atom, walked on the moon, reached for the stars, all by defying the limits others had set for them. If the Dominion believed the blade was untouchable, then Elias would prove them wrong. Breach sequence engaged, Nick 7 announced. No turning back now. The airlock hissed open, and the void swallowed them whole as they launched toward the ship that housed a weapon that could reshape the war, and perhaps the fate of the entire galaxy. The void swallowed them whole, wrapping their suits in absolute silence as Elias Voss and his team propelled toward the Sovereign Exile. The Dominion flagship loomed before them like a slumbering titan, its hull glinting with a faint, ominous glow from the residual energy coursing through its dark plating. Elias adjusted his visor, the HUD scanning for anomalies. The Vorlax prided themselves on perfection. No flaws, no vulnerabilities. And yet, here he was, clinging to the side of their most prized warship, about to breach what they considered impenetrable. A hand signal from Soren Vance confirmed the infiltration point. An auxiliary, maintenance hatch, a weak spot in the security matrix that Nick 7 had identified. The entryway was shielded, a pulse field shimmering across its surface. Vance's wrist module flickered, sending out an interference burst. The shield faltered, then dropped. No alarms, no alerts. Elias pulled himself inside first, his boots making contact with the sleek flooring of the Dominion's inner corridors. A wave of sterilized air filled his helmet, as the artificial atmosphere equalized. His team followed, weapons at the ready. Dr. Asher Cole hesitated, eyes darting along the strange, flowing architecture of the corridors. "It's like walking inside something that's alive," he muttered. The walls pulsed faintly with energy, as though the ship itself was breathing. Tessa Renner, always the pragmatic one, scoffed. "Less poetry, more focus. We need to move." They pressed forward, moving with precise, calculated efficiency through the dim corridors. Elias had studied Vorlax ship layouts before, and even though the sovereign exile was beyond anything they had encountered, some things remained constant. The Dominion was obsessed with hierarchy, order. That meant the most important relics would be stored at the heart of the vessel. Nick 7's voice crackled through the comms. "Vault detected. Sector D17. Security readings are..." The AI hesitated. "Unusual," Elias frowned. "Unusual how?" "Layered encryptions, biosignature locks, quantum destabilizers. The Dominion doesn't just want to keep intruders out. They want to keep something in." His grip tightened around his rifle. He already knew what that meant. The Oblivion Blade wasn't just a weapon, it was something else. Suddenly the ship trembled, a low vibration rolling through the corridors like a distant growl. The lights overhead flickered. A noise echoed from deeper within the passageway. A scraping sound, unnatural, rhythmic. Elias raised a fist, signaling the team to halt. Every breath felt heavier now, thick with tension. The sound grew closer. A shadow moved at the edge of the dim corridor, then another. Elias lifted his rifle, pulse pounding in his ears. The Dominion patrols shouldn't have detected them yet. Then came the whisper, a voice like broken glass and static, curling into his earpiece in a language he didn't recognize. Tessa exhaled sharply. The hell was that? Asher swallowed, hard. That wasn't Vorlax. A shape lunged from the darkness, a blur of blackened metal moving like liquid, inhumanly fast. Elias fired on instinct. Blue energy rounds tore through the air, slamming into the figure, only for it to twist, morph, avoiding the shots with impossible precision. Then it was among them. Soren barely had time to react before the thing sliced through his chest armor, sending him crashing to the ground, choking on his own blood. Tessa roared, unleashing a volley of plasma rounds, but the figure melted into the shadows before reappearing behind her. A razor-thin limb lashed out, cutting deep into her side. Elias didn't hesitate. He lunged, slamming his combat knife into what he thought was its torso. The blade met resistance, but not flesh, not metal. Something else. Something wrong. The figure twisted in pain, and for the first time Elias got a clear look at it. It wasn't Vorlax. It wasn't anything he had ever seen, a humanoid form shifting like living void, its face a swirling abyss where no eyes, no features existed. And then it spoke again, its voice scraping against his mind like a dying star. "You should not have come." A sudden pulse of energy erupted from the entity, hurling the entire team backward. Elias slammed against the corridor wall, his vision flickering. The ship groaned around them, as though reacting to the disturbance. Nick 7's voice returned, urgent. "Commander, I'm detecting. Not now. Nix." Elias spat, pulling himself to his feet, pain lancing through his ribs, but the entity didn't press its attack. Instead, it withdrew, retreating into the shadows as if the very act of existing in this place was excruciating. And then, silence. Asher coughed, struggling to his knees. What the hell was that? Tessa grimaced, holding her wound. Not Dominion. That's for sure. Elias wiped the blood from his mouth, forcing his body to focus on the mission, not the horror that had just unfolded. They had come for the Oblivion Blade. But something else was here. Something older. Something that did not want to be found. The silence left in the wake of the entity's retreat was deafening. Elias Voss pressed a hand against his chest, feeling the dull ache where he had slammed into the corridor wall. His breath came ragged through gritted teeth. His team wasn't faring much better. Soren Vance was gone, his body torn open in a way that made Elias's stomach churn. Tessa Renner bled freely from her side, her face pale but determined. Asher Cole clutched his data slate like a lifeline, eyes wide, scanning for answers he already feared. Status? Elias forced the word out between gasps. Tessa spat blood onto the floor. Alive. Pissed. Asher swallowed hard, his voice unsteady. That thing, it wasn't Vorlax, and it wasn't just some security drone, it was something else. Elias didn't have time to dwell on what that meant. They had come, here for the Oblivion Blade, and whatever had just attacked them was proof that this mission was even more dangerous than they had thought. Nix, he rasped, re-establishing the connection to his AI. What were you trying to tell me before? That thing nearly ripped us apart? Nick Seven's synthetic voice came back sharp. I'm detecting massive fluctuations in the ship's energy field. That entity was not part of standard Dominion security protocols. No kidding, Tessa muttered, wincing as she pressed a medgel patch to her wound. Nix continued, ignoring the sarcasm. Additionally, the energy readings around the vault where the Oblivion Blade is stored have changed. Whatever just happened triggered a cascade effect in the ship's containment systems. Elias straightened. Containment? A pause. Then, Commander, I believe the Vorlax were not protecting the Oblivion Blade from the galaxy. They were protecting the galaxy from it. The weight of those words settled heavily on Elias's shoulders. The Oblivion Blade had always been spoken of as a weapon, a force of destruction beyond comprehension. But what if it was something worse? What if it wasn't meant to be wielded? Doesn't matter, he said, steel returning to his voice. We came here to take it, we're not leaving empty-handed. Tessa pushed herself upright with a groan. Then we move now. I'm not interested in running into whatever the hell that thing was again. Elias checked his weapon, adjusting, the kinetic stabilizers on his wrist guards. Let's finish this. They moved in absolute silence, navigating the winding, almost organic corridors of the sovereign exile. The walls pulsed faintly, as though reacting to their presence. The ship felt wrong, like it had been waiting for them. As they neared Sector, D-17 Nix 7 provided a final warning. Vault security measures are in flux, expect instability. Elias didn't need to be told twice. Every instinct screamed that something was very, very wrong. The door to the vault chamber stood before them, a monolithic construct of obsidian metal, etched with luminous symbols that burned to look at for too long. The air crackled with energy. Gravity felt heavier here, as though the ship itself resisted their intrusion. Tessa glanced at Asher. Can you crack it? Asher's fingers danced across his data slate, his brow furrowing. It's not just encryption. It's alive. The Dominion built this vault around something they barely understood. Elias had had enough. He stepped forward, pressed his palm against the door, and reality shifted. A voice unlike anything he had ever heard flooded his mind. Who dares? Pain lanced through his skull, a pressure that threatened to crush his thoughts, unravel his very sense of self. He gritted his teeth, refusing to yield. And then, the door opened. Inside, the chamber was vast, stretching beyond normal perception. The walls did not end, fading into a swirling abyss of fractured space. And at the center of it all, hovering above a platform of shifting stone, was the Oblivion Blade. It was not a sword, not in any way that made sense. It was a tear in the fabric of reality itself, a sliver of unmake, pulsing with an anti-light that devoured all around it. Elias took a step closer. He could feel it pulling at him, whispering, "Take me." His breath hitched. The voice was not Vorlax. It was not human. It was something else. Something older. Tessa exhaled sharply. "Voss, I don't think this is a good idea." Asher stared at the readings on his slate, horrified. "This thing doesn't just cut, it erases. It doesn't leave wounds, it removes what was." Elias heard them. He understood the risk, and yet humanity was losing. The Vorlax had pushed them to the brink. They had slaughtered billions. They needed a weapon. He reached out. The moment his fingers brushed the hilt, the universe screamed. A shockwave exploded outward, hurling the team back. Elias fell to his knees, clutching his skull as memories that were not his own burned into his mind. He saw worlds collapsing, time unraveling, civilizations wiped from existence with a single stroke, and then he was standing, the blade was in his grasp. And he was still here. The ship groaned, the structure warping around them. The vault began to collapse. Tessa grabbed his arm. "Voss, we have to go." Elias tore his gaze from the void edge of the blade and nodded. They had what they came for. Now they just had to survive. Alarms shrieked through the sovereign exile. The Dominion had felt it, their ship convulsed, as though reality itself had protested Elias's theft of the blade. And then came the voices of the Vorlax. "Human filth. You have doomed yourselves." Elias turned just in time to see Dominion shock troopers pouring into the corridor, weapons raised, energy lances humming with lethal intent. Tessa didn't wait. She fired first. The battle erupted in chaos. Elias moved differently now. The Oblivion Blade pulsed in his hand. His first swing, a single, effortless motion, did not slice through the enemy. It erased them. One moment, they existed. The next, they did not. The Vorlax reeled in terror. Elias gritted his teeth. The power was intoxicating, overwhelming, but he could feel it, beneath his skin, the unraveling. They had to escape. Now. Nick Seven's voice crackled. "Commander, I have your exfil route, but you need to move." The ship was tearing itself apart. Elias sprinted down the corridor, his team covering his flank as Vorlax forces fell back, not out of strategy, but out of fear. They boarded their stolen vessel, Nick 7 already spooling the FTL drive. As they breached into space, Elias turned to see the sovereign exile collapsing inward, as though the universe itself was consuming it. And then, they were gone. Elias sat in the cockpit, the Oblivion Blade still in his grasp. It was silent now, but he could still feel it just beneath reality. Waiting. Tessa exhaled, shaking her head. "That wasn't a weapon, Voss. That was a curse." Asher was pale. "We have no idea what we've just unleashed." Elias tightened. His grip. Maybe not. But the war wasn't over yet. The stolen Corsair-class stealth ship tore through the void, its hull groaning as the FTL drive surged to escape velocity. Behind them, the sovereign exile crumbled, imploding as if it had never existed. Space itself bent inward, swallowing the massive warship into a silent nothingness, a void that should not have been. Elias Voss gripped the Oblivion Blade tighter, the impossible weight of it pressing into his palm. The weapon pulsed not with heat or energy, but with absence, a tangible hole in existence. He could feel it pulling at him, whispering at the edges of his mind. It wanted more. Tessa Renner leaned against the bulkhead, clutching the wound in her side. "You really think we can just fly out of here?" Her voice was sharp, edged with exhaustion and barely veiled panic. "We just stole something that erased a damn warship, Elias. The Dominion is going to hunt us across the stars." Nick 7's voice interrupted, cold and urgent. "Correction, they already are." The ship's holodisplay flickered, revealing An incoming fleet of Dominion warships, blinking into real space behind them. A blockade. Elias exhaled sharply. They were waiting. The Vorlax were many things, arrogant, ruthless, powerful, but they were not stupid. They had anticipated. This had likely feared this day since the moment the Oblivion Blade was locked away, and now they were coming to erase the mistake. A command transmission blared through their comms laced with the cold, metallic precision of the Vorlax Supreme Strategist, High Warden Almec. Human. Return the artifact or face annihilation. Elias didn't respond. He turned to Tessa and Asher, both staring at him with the same unspoken question. What do we do? His grip tightened around the blade, and then the warships opened fire. The first barrage of plasma lances slammed into their shields, sending the ship into a violent roll. The Corsair class wasn't built for combat, let alone against an entire Armada. They wouldn't last long. Shields down to 32%, Nick 7 reported. Impact in 20 seconds. Evasive maneuvers insufficient. Elias felt it before he made the decision. The blade wanted to be used. He unstrapped himself from the pilot's seat, stepping toward the airlock. Tessa's eyes widened. Elias, don't you dare, but it was already too late. He reached the outer hatch, exhaled once, and then stepped into the void. The universe around him was silent. No sound, no air, no gravity, just the cold, vast nothingness of space. And yet, the Oblivion Blade pulsed in his hand, a gravitational paradox keeping him tethered to existence. The Dominion warships adjusted their targeting systems. They saw him. They fired. Elias swung, and the universe broke. The blade did not cut through metal. It erased. The first Dominion warship, a dreadnought half a mile long, simply ceased to be. No explosion, no debris. One moment, it existed. The next, it was gone, as though it had never been there at all. The shockwave rippled across the fleet. A silence louder than any explosion. The Dominion hesitated. For the first time in history, they knew fear. Elias floated amid the wreckage of nothing, the blade humming in his grasp. And then, they fired everything. A storm of plasma, torpedoes, and antimatter charges rushed toward him, enough firepower to obliterate a moon. Elias should have died. Physics demanded it. Instead, the blade moved before he did, as if responding to some primal instinct buried deep in his soul. He twisted, bringing the weapon across his chest in an arc, and the incoming fire simply vanished. Tessa and Asher watched. From the cockpit, eyes wide with disbelief, Tessa whispered, "Holy shit. He's not just using it, it's using him." Elias felt the weight of her words, even in the emptiness of space. The blade wasn't just a weapon, it was something else, something alive. And it was hungry. The Vorlax fleet hesitated for the first time in their history. Their unstoppable empire had met something greater than them, and Elias knew in that moment he could end them. One more swing, one final cut. The Dominion, the enemy that had razed Earth's colonies, that had slaughtered billions, would be gone. But at what cost? The Oblivion Blade pulsed, whispering to him. It showed him futures where he kept going, where he erased not just the Vorlax but everything, because that was its nature. It did not stop. It did not care. It only erased. Elias closed his eyes, and then he made his choice. He turned the blade on itself. A shockwave unlike anything before erupted outward, a surge of impossible energy folding into itself. The Vorlax fleet veered away, their engines flickering as something far greater than them unfolded in real space. Elias felt himself falling, dissolving, into the fabric of the void, and then he was somewhere else. Tessa and Asher sat in stunned silence as their ship's sensors failed to register what had just happened. Elias was gone, the blade was gone, and the Dominion fleet? Retreating. They had won. But at what cost? Tessa clenched her fists. "We bring him back." Asher exhaled. If he's even somewhere we can reach. A moment of silence passed between them, and then, Nick Seven's voice. I have a signal, somewhere beyond the limits of known space. Elias opened his eyes. He stood in a place that was not a place, a void that stretched infinitely yet confined him to nothingness. And in the distance, something watched. Something older than the Dominion, older than the Blade, and it spoke. Welcome, traveler. We have been waiting for you. The void pressed against him, a weightless infinite abyss stretching beyond comprehension. Elias Voss drifted through a place that should not exist, a place beyond time, beyond light, beyond meaning. And yet, he was not alone. The voice that had spoken to him before resonated through the emptiness, not through sound, but through something deeper, an understanding that bypassed words altogether. You have wielded the key, but you are not its master. Elias turned, though there was no floor beneath him, no air around him. Before him stood a figure, or perhaps an absence, something like a shadow, cast where there was no light. It had no face, no body, and yet he could feel its presence as if it had always been there. His grip tightened, except there was nothing to grip. He looked down, realizing his hand was empty. The Oblivion Blade was gone. His pulse quickened. Had it been taken? Had he lost it? The entity seemed to sense his thoughts. It has returned to where it belongs. You are free of its burden. Elias exhaled, a mix of relief and loss twisting in his gut. The weapon had nearly consumed him. It had given him power beyond comprehension, but at what cost? For a long moment he was silent. Then he lifted his gaze. Where am I? The entity didn't answer right away. Instead, the space around them shifted, no longer an endless abyss, but something else. A fractured sky, split by cascading lines of energy, as if the very fabric of reality had been stitched together with scars. You are in the place between, it finally said. Between what was and what could be. Elias frowned. That doesn't explain anything. The entity tilted its non-existent head. No. But it is the only answer that matters. Elias felt a pull, something inside him stirring, calling him back. A thread of existence, a connection to something real. His team, Tessa, Asher, Nix. They weren't done with him yet. He clenched his fists. I need to go back. The entity did not object, nor did it encourage. It simply regarded him with an infinite patience, as if it had seen this moment play out 1,000 times before. Then go. And just like that, the void collapsed. Tessa paced the length of the cockpit, her fingers drumming against the console, frustration boiling beneath her skin. It had been minutes since Elias had vanished, maybe an hour, maybe more. Time felt broken. Asher sat nearby, running scan after scan, muttering under his breath. No trace, no readings. It's like he swallowed. Like he was never here. Tessa's jaw tightened. I don't accept that. Nick Seven, ever the impartial observer, interjected. Commander Voss engaged with an anomaly beyond our understanding. His return is improbable. Tessa slammed her fist against the console. Then we make it probable. Before Nick Seven could reply, a surge of energy rippled through the ship. Alarms flared. The lights flickered. And then, a figure materialized in the center of the cockpit. Elias collapsed to his knees, gasping, his body flickering between existence and something else, something less real. Tessa was at his side in an instant, catching his shoulders before he could fall further. Elias, he blinked, eyes dazed, unfocused, then locked onto her. Real, grounded, her, real, grounded. Here. Asher exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. How the hell did you... Elias didn't answer right away. He flexed his fingers, feeling the weight of his own existence again. I don't know. His voice was raw, barely above a whisper. But I think something let me go. Tessa's eyes flickered with something, Relief, exhaustion, anger, maybe all of them. But she didn't push, not yet. Instead, she just grinned. Well, next time, try not to almost erase yourself from existence, okay? He chuckled weakly. No promises. As Nick 7 stabilized the ship's systems, Asher turned his gaze toward the holo display. The Dominion fleet was gone. No pursuit. No retaliation, just silence. Tessa frowned. They should have hunted us down by now. Asher tapped a few commands, scanning known Dominion frequencies. What he found made his blood run cold. He turned back to them, voice tight. Something happened when the Oblivion Blade disappeared. The Dominion, they're pulling back. Elias pushed himself upright, still lightheaded but focused now. Pulling back? Asher nodded. Not just from us, from everywhere. The realization sank in. The Dominion, the galactic conquerors, the merciless exterminators of entire civilizations, they were retreating. Nick 7's voice held a rare note of uncertainty, possible interpretations. Either they no longer see humanity as a threat, or they now fear something even greater. Elias stared out the viewport at the empty void beyond. A war had ended today, but another had just begun. And somewhere, beyond the edge of the known universe, something was watching. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport, distant and cold, but something about them felt different now. The war was over, but not in the way anyone had expected. Elias Voss stood at the edge of the Corsair's bridge, staring into the void, his mind heavy with what had happened. The Oblivion Blade was gone, yet its presence still lingered in his thoughts, an echo that refused to fade. He had wielded something beyond comprehension, something that should never have been touched, and the universe had trembled because of it. Tessa Renner leaned against the railing beside him, arms crossed, watching him carefully. You haven't said much since we left Dominion space. He exhaled slowly, his gaze still locked on the endless black. I don't know what to say. She studied him for a long moment before speaking. We made it out. You made it back. The Dominion is in retreat. That should be a win, right? Elias wanted to agree. He wanted to believe that they had done something good, something necessary, but something deep inside him told him that this wasn't over, that it had only just begun. Asher Cole's voice cut through the quiet tension. So, slight problem. Both. Elias and Tessa turned. Asher was hunched over the holo terminal, his brows furrowed, his face pale. I've been running scans on Dominion broadcasts. They aren't just retreating, Elias. A pause. They're abandoning entire sectors. Elias frowned. That doesn't make sense. They don't just run. Asher swallowed hard. They do if they're scared. Tessa's expression darkened. Scared of what? The ship fell into a heavy silence. No one had an answer. Then Nick 7, the AI who had seen more than all of them combined, spoke. Analyzing recovered Dominion data, cross-referencing classified historical records, processing. The holo display flickered, and then an image appeared. A map of the galaxy. Hundreds of Dominion sectors marked in red, blinking with warning indicators. But it wasn't the retreat that made Elias's stomach turn to ice. It was what lay beyond, a region of space with no name, no records, no history, and from within that darkness something was moving, something vast, something ancient, something that the Dominion, for all their arrogance and power, had feared more than anything else. Tessa's breath hitched. What the hell is that? Nick 7's voice was devoid of emotion, but the weight of the answer pressed into every corner of the ship. The Dominion called it the Silent Void. Elias's jaw tightened as the realization hit. They had thought the Oblivion Blade was the greatest threat in the galaxy. They had been wrong, and whatever was coming, it had just woken up.